Hey, welcome back to the Scaling Secrets podcast. Lisa Piers is here, and she is the founder and director of Peers and Players. She is a respected film and TV actor, and she is all about having those courageous conversations, making an impact, presenting with authenticity, and so much more. So we are going to find out about some of Lisa's training methods to help you be confident when tackling challenging presentations and conversations, to be happier, to be more motivated at work. All of those sound wonderful. It's what we all want, right? We all want to be happy and productive. So Lisa, glad to be speaking with you.
And you, Robert. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Very happy to have you. And so I introduced you a little bit, but do you think, is there anything that we left out, or is there a better way to present yourself and what you do and your uniqueness? Do you have like the 30-second elevator pitch?
Well, as you said, I was a well-known actress in Australia for decades, and now I have my own business, teaching people how to communicate and be more happy at work using the actor's toolbox, using our knowledge of how to use your body, how to use your voice, as well as your words and your intention to sort of help people to have empathy and understanding and leadership at work.
Wonderful. And that sounds like there's so much fun to be had there with all the tools in the toolbox. When you mention the actor tools, what comes to mind, knowing not very much about acting, is there's the yes and concept with improv, where someone says something, and even if it's silly or goofy, instead of just stopping them in their tracks, you say yes and you hijack on top of that. With acting, what comes to mind is pausing and leaving that space, like William Shatner loved to say something and then kind of pause for dramatic effect. And that's just what goes through my head. But how on track or off track am I with that? What does it mean to use these actors tools?
You want to come work for me? That's a very good summary of some of the things that we teach.
Wonderful, I'm hired.
The yes and concept is just a concept for life. It's an improv concept. But, to be able to say yes rather than but, yes and rather than yes but or no, we do teach. That is part of what we teach, is how the energy drops and how the engagement drops when you're not using yes to accept the other person's point of view. Whether you agree or not, you can still value the other person's point of view.
That makes total sense. Here I am yes-anding you. And sometimes
Yes.
when someone says something that we might not disagree with, we can think, well, you thought that based on your information, or you're making a point and I see your point, or I'm meeting you partway there. And it took me way too many years to realize that if you're too blunt and brute force and you completely kill someone's motivation or shut down someone's idea, then they will become very closed off to you. And when you're trying to correct the behavior or change what they're thinking or saying, and you just completely stop them right there, then they will be really shut down. So I can see the need to do that sort of thing. And so what kind of situations do you find yourself in when you teach people to be better leaders? What kind of organizations are you helping, and what's the environment?
Well, our biggest clients are tech companies these days, because since I moved to the United States, I live in San Francisco now. So Cisco and Splunk, Hulu, companies like that are our biggest clients. But historically, we've had the business for 25 years. Feels like 45 some days. Banks, big like financial institutions, KPMG, Baker McKenzie, law firms, mostly global, because my team are about 300 people spread out around the world. So we work for companies mostly that have offices in different places, so we can have a sort of a coherent team across different locations and different cultures, different regions.
And would you say that the problems that exist are universal with all these companies, industries, locations, or do those change?
The biggest thing is learning to be a human. We always say, like, how long did you spend learning to be an engineer, or learning to be an accountant, or 5 years, 6 years, learning to be a lawyer, and how long did you spend learning to be a manager, learning to be a leader, learning to be a good human? A lot of that goes by the wayside. The traditional teaching doesn't really teach that.
You hear some of these horror stories, especially in the tech industry, of these sociopaths to be to use a polite term, right? That they gotten to where they are, but sometimes through just being a total jerk and railroading people, and then that only gets you so far. And then when you can't communicate, then that becomes a problem. And then there was something else that you mentioned when we began speaking, which was like something about just like being careful with your words. And I find that very interesting, especially it took me so long to realize that I needed to notice not just the words that are said, but also the words that I say, and that words matter, and that it's really easy to use like this word instead of that word, but some just the wrong thing, and someone can think the wrong thing, or if we're not presented well enough, or not well spoken enough, or if we don't speak clearly or slowly enough, there's so many ways to go wrong. And so, where can we
Yeah.
begin to fix this problem? What's sort of the starting point?
Well, firstly, one of the biggest reasons people leave their jobs these days is because they don't get on with their manager. They don't know how to communicate with their manager, and their manager doesn't know how to communicate with them. In terms of what you're saying about words, it's not so much being well spoken as being as meeting the other person. So understanding where that person's coming from, using some of their words, using some of their pace. Matching, as they say in NLP, which you might have heard of, matching with somebody helps them to feel more comfortable. And when you can have somebody feel more comfortable, more open, have more empathy for them, have them sort of feel like they're being felt and heard and seen, then they're more likely to develop a trust, psychological safety, and a relationship where they can say the things that they need to say and feel safe saying them. And have that open and frank conversation, that needs to be had.
I find myself doing that, the idea there of the matching and mirroring, and if someone is speaking in a certain way, then to maybe see if only if it makes sense, if it applies, if they say this keyword or this phrase, maybe use that. And then also in a Zoom and podcasting sort of sense, I've noticed that I'm not great at it, but I do my best if someone is speaking fast or loud or soft or slow, I kind of adjust a little bit what I'm doing. And then also in kind of the what you'd even call it, like the chunk size, right? If someone is answering in like 30-second sound bites, that's what I try to do. And then if you're talking to me in 2 or 3 minute answers, and I do my best to kind of match that, just to make, as you said, to make you feel more comfortable, and to just make the communication a little bit smoother, a little bit less awkward. And so we can talk about theories and problems all day long, but what's really fun, at least for me, are the stories. So I'm sure with all of your decades of experience and working with all these companies, you have some sort of fun stories that show off your problem solving, right? Where you come to some situation and it's a total mess and you work your magic and it's really great. So what do you have in your back pocket as far as a fun story?
Well, our main thing that we do is helping people to have what we call courageous conversations, to practice those conversations, and then we give our impressions of how the person landed with us, like you said, in all the aspects that you spoke about, and then give them coaching about perhaps in future you could, like you said, speak more slowly, speak more, come forward towards me if I'm forward, come back a little if I'm more of an introverted person. I don't have a lot of stories per se because our work is confidential. It's live, it's not recorded, it's live training. So I can't give away instances, if you like, but I can say that some companies like Cisco, we've done more than 500 sessions for them. So, the big story is that they find that this is really, really useful. And especially when they're going through difficult times, they've had a lot of mergers, acquisitions, things like that, where people are unsettled. It really helps people to feel more comfortable and come back and do more training. We do several different kinds of trainings for those companies. So I can tell you a funny story, though. One of our actors is also a nurse, or was a nurse part-time. And she was in a very challenging conversation with somebody in the public service, actually, in Australia. And she was challenging them and being really confronting, as we were asked to do. And the person, I don't know if they had a high blood pressure or what, but they fainted. They actually got so het up that they fainted. And they ended up on the floor. And when they woke up, my actor, who was also a nurse, as I said, was looking over them, tending to them. And that was pretty freaky, I think, for them to have to have that character, break character, actually reveal themselves. So that's a
Well,
very unusual story. We don't usually challenge people so much that they faint, but we challenge them enough that they get a little out of their comfort zone, because that's where the learning happens.
and speaking of that, of the comfort zone and the nervousness, do you find that when you do this consulting, are people afraid to even speak? Are they worried about making a mistake? Are they terrified? What is their emotional state? Where are they really stuck?
It depends a lot on people's own abilities, how long perhaps they've been a manager, how long they've been a leader, what sort of training they've had before. But we always try to set a container that's very, confidential, safe. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help you practice those skills. Whether you know what they are, if you do, go ahead and practice them. And if you don't, then let's run through this conversation. Nobody's like grading you. There's no manager here watching over. It's just me, the participants, or one of my actors and our participants. So we try to create a container that makes it like, this is a place to fail. This is a place to try things on. And then we will honestly give you feedback about how that landed with us. And, that's something we just don't get in life. People, if they don't like what you said, they'll walk away, right? Or they'll leave the company and go and find a job somewhere else. So for us, it's like, well, when you said, you've got to do blah, 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 or whatever it is, I felt dismissed. I felt diminished. And when people realize, wow, I didn't realize, and I certainly didn't want somebody to feel that way. It's often an amazing realization for people. Or people will be saying the right things. Oh, I understand, that must be terrible, but their face is scowling or something like that. And we're like, you know what? The words sounded okay, but your demeanor, the expression on your face, whatever it was, or you turned away from me, or you had closed body language, that was not in integrity with, what your intention was. So we suggest that you sit back, slow down, or whatever it is, and that would make me feel more comfortable, more cared for. So that's sort of how we try to frame it, like this is a practice session.
That gives us a good idea about your process, that in real life there are no do-overs, and in real life there is no mind reading. And as you said, someone might be speaking and giving some kind of presentation, explaining something, and they say just the wrong thing, and it just that sends you down a path, or as you said, they're not congruent with the body language or the stance or the smiling or the eye contact. It seems like there's a million ways to go wrong, and if we try to manage all of that, think of all that, that just seems almost impossible. But if someone sees you raw and authentically trying to communicate this, then they can give the handful of feedback and get that low-hanging fruit figured out. And so that's wonderful to hear about. And so is this sort of a one-time thing or an ongoing thing, or do you come back and revisit later, or just what's the long term like?
It depends on the client. Sometimes we'll work one-on-one with one person once. If they have a presentation to give, we'll talk to them about how to make an impact that way. But like I said, with some clients, we've come back several times with different programs and sometimes work with the same people over and over again. So it really depends on what the person wants and needs and how much they resonate and learn from what we give them. But I have to say, we always recognize people's strengths as well. We never go in and just say, oh, that was terrible because it made me feel this. We're always like, wow, when you said, I understand, and you nodded, and you paused, and you gave me some space to feel my feelings, then I really felt honored, respected. So we always want to recognize people's strengths as well. I think it's like human nature that we tend to criticize ourselves and others first. And so one of the big things we teach is recognize your own strengths. What are you actually good at? What's making an impact in a positive way before we talk about how you can improve?
That has been something I've been working on my entire life, is to be more positive, especially positive to myself, because it's so tempting and natural to just go for what's wrong, because logically you think, oh, well, if I just take care of all the negative, then the positive what remains. But if that's all you focus on, then you will just go down the path of even more negativity. And that's the place that we don't want to do or want to be. And so, as far as all of these things that you help out with the presenting and the communicating and the leadership, as far as it applying to scaling a business, what does that lead to? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like if someone's team works really well, or if they're a good leader, then I imagine it just makes the growth of the company a lot easier.
Well, of course, keeping your staff is a very big part of growing a business, having that loyalty, having people feel comfortable and committed to the business and staying rather than, every time there's a problem to go somewhere else. I think that's the big part that we contribute to just having people want to stay, want to feel comfortable and accepted and cared for by their organization. And also for the leaders to feel that they have some leadership skills to be able to make that happen. So, it's I want people to be happy at work. And if they're happy, they'll be productive. And if they're productive and happy, then they're going to stay. And you're going to retain them. Think about how much people spend on training people and training them up. And it's like, oh God, I've been training that person for a year and now they're gone. I've got to train someone else. The cost, not just financially, but emotionally and physically, it can be very. So we help people to feel cared for and want to stay and want to commit and want to give that bit extra because they feel that they belong.
Wonderful. There are intangibles and there are tangibles as well as far as the benefits for that go. And then when it comes time to people to train their leaders and to keep people from leaving and to make them feel comfortable and all those other things, do you see anyone missing the mark these days? Is there just some kind of just easy low-hanging fruit that we can say, everyone makes this mistake, let's fix it? What do you have for us? What comes to mind?
I think for leaders to feel like they have to have all the answers. I'm the boss, I have to be able to tell you what to do and how it is. And, people want to feel that they can contribute. So I think creating that more sort of collegiate, collaborative environment, the higher up you get, for a leader to be able to show their own vulnerability, to be able to show their own heart. Not in a weak way, but in a way of, well, I've experienced that too, You can have a glimpse of our leaders as humans, then we're more likely to also feel safe to be vulnerable. And I think that's a really big thing that we encounter all the time. It's people wanting to play a role, if you like, rather than let their own authenticity and their own integrity shine through.
What a concept. If you want someone to trust you and listen to you, then open up some part of yourself. And speaking of vulnerability, what do you have about your own vulnerability? Is there anything that you can share with us just about your growth or your struggles or just some of these adventures you've been through?
Well, as I said, I've been an actress all my life since I was a teenager, and I had a lot of success when I was younger in Australia. I was in some quite big movies, ended up doing a lot of theatre and TV commercials and, all of that. And I was just, because I had so much success so young, I starred in a TV series and I was the worst brat. I was the worst communicator myself. And I always find it so ironic that now I'm teaching communication skills, and it's been a hard and still a continuing journey of learning to respect for other people. There was one time I remember at a rap party from a TV show that I did where I got so angry with the director, I was so critical, that I threw a drink in the director's face. And I'm so ashamed now and so embarrassed that I was such a brat. So I've made pretty much every mistake in the book myself.
But then you've made those mistakes, then you can help the rest of us avoid those mistakes.
I mean, that contributed to the demise of my acting career because I wasn't good at listening and understanding the pressures that other people were under. I was so caught up in my own stardom and my own leading roles at too young an age. And opportunities just fell in my lap, here's a movie, here's a TV show, here's this. And I had to be really humiliate myself and be humbled and then, regrow and relearn.
creative destruction, they say, right? And so sometimes we have to go through those painful journeys in order to learn the lesson. If someone had just told you those things, you wouldn't have clicked, but you had to just go through all that pain and all that suffering in order to come out the other side and have those sorts of realizations. And so we've been talking about, all these things about communicating and leadership and kind of being more like emotionally self-aware. And then when it comes to being happy and being motivated, is there a secret cheat code to that as well? Or just how do we be happy and motivated in general or at work?
For me, my biggest joy is helping other people. When I get off a session that, I'm truly grateful and truly have had realizations about how they can be a better human and a better human at work specifically, but we hope that it expands beyond that. That is the goal for me, is being there for somebody else's growth. I love it. I'm really passionate about it.
Wonderful. Be there for other people, not just about yourself, because it's too much of a cycle to be selfish. And then if you have any amount of low self-esteem, which who we're kidding, we all do, then it's hard to keep that motivation. If you're just trying to help yourself, but you have low self-esteem. On the other hand, if you see the pain in others and you see the way you can help others and you have that kind of empathy and all that, then it becomes easier to have those courageous conversations and to take those actions and help others. And so do you have a story along those lines as far as like helping other people, either like someone you helped or in these workplace environments where someone was like lacking the motivation and you kind of open their eyes to this whole paying it forward? What comes to mind there?
Again, I can't really give confidential stories from my clients because it is in that confidential container, but I think it speaks for itself that we get amazing feedback, that people are really grateful for the insights that we've given them. And because it's the sort of insight that you don't get in real life. Someone doesn't say to you, "Oh, when you said this, it made me feel that," or, "When you did this, I felt that." I can't give you a specific, but I can say that, our clients keep coming back, and they've kept coming back for 25 years. So I think that speaks for itself.
I think you are doing something right. And then as far as I don't know if like bag of tricks is the right term, but you have all of the acting techniques that we mentioned at the beginning. Is there anything that just is really goofy or really obscure, just as far as your various kind of like acting methods? Have you ever been in a situation where you said, if only I used such and such acting trick to really drive my point home? Is there anything along those lines?
Well, I think what you said at the beginning, Robert, was very astute, like saying yes. Just simply remembering to say yes and remembering to breathe. We get, head up and in our head and all that. So I think a big thing is remembering to keep your feet on the ground. Remember to breathe and not try to rush and fill every silence. The statistics about us not being able to tolerate a pause that's more than 15 seconds. And I think that's a big thing to remember, is to take that pause, not to feel like you have to fill it. Because it's a time when you can be receiving what the other person has said and done and really feeling into it, and also planning, well, how am I going to achieve my objective going forward? How am I going to help this person? How am I going to lead this person to being more successful? So yeah, silence, breathing and silence.
Well, here I am breathing and trying to keep as long of a silence as possible in a podcast. I can't always do that, but I definitely can see your point, how having that silence, it gives time for what you say to land or give you time to process. There's that saying of, if you want to have good conversation, don't listen with the intent to reply. Don't be thinking about the next thing you'll say, even though they're only saying half of their sentence so far. Just taking what they say, and it's okay to have a little bit of a pause. And that's, again, on the long list of natural tendencies that I am trying to outgrow. That time, especially when you're presenting, it just seems to fly by. And 15 seconds or even like 5 seconds seems like an eternity. But I definitely hear what you're saying about breathing and slowing down and letting things take the time to be profound. And this is just a wonderful conversation we're having, lots of just helpful advice. Is there anything that you think that we left out as far as these drama skills, leadership skills that we're talking about? Is there anything that like I haven't asked you that you wish I'd ask you?
I think a really good acting skill is what we call pursuing your objective. So having an intention when you come into a conversation or when you're giving a presentation, be really clear about what is my intention, and then pursuing different ways to achieve that objective. I mean, that's the basic core of acting and the basic core of life, which we forget about. You know, we go into communication, we're not really thinking about, well, what do I really want to achieve? What do I really want that person to feel at the end of this conversation? What commitment do I want to get from them? And how am I going to lead them into that? So I think that the saying yes that we started with and thinking about your objective are two really skills that we help people to learn.
I agree. And I think that idea of the intention is powerful because, as you said, it puts a goal on your conversation so you can say, what do I want them to feel or what action do I want them to take? And I imagine that you can even, as you said, you can apply to any conversation. You might even be able to dial it back, right? You might say, I just want to make this one point, or I just want to get information, I just want to listen. I imagine that this intention can mean many things.
That's right, yeah. And then you have a reference point so that you can, like you were talking about in that pause or in that space, you know, am I achieving that objective? Am I helping that person to feel comfortable enough so that they will commit to blah, 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 whatever it is? You know, and people like to be acknowledged. Again, going back to what we said about recognizing one's own strengths and recognizing other people's strengths.
Wonderful. And by applying some of this, I imagine that conversations will make a lot more sense. We all been in those situations where it was just chaos, it was a mess, we got angry. But then if we keep many of these factors in mind, from the yes and to having the goal to listening to pausing to breathing to even just a little bit of mirroring or body language, by having all of these tools in the toolbox, then we can have calmer and more rational and more productive conversations that actually get us somewhere because we decided what that goal is. So this is just a very just deep conversation and many things to think about. And where do you come in? You mentioned a little bit already about the service that you provide to some of these companies. So what does that package or what does that service look like? And if someone wants to inquire about it, how do they know if their company is the right size and the right fit for you?
Well, firstly, look at our website, peersandplayers.com. We work with everybody from, like I said, from a single person who wants help with a presentation or a conversation, right through to big global organizations where we have a team, you know, in Singapore, Brazil, Australia, both sides of the States. We have a united team that sort of teaches the same training across different countries, different regions. So it's not about how big or small, it's more about, does our service help you, you know, be more effective and be happier at work?
Wonderful. And we can all use some extra help in that department, some more than others. And we might even not even be aware of all the ways that we're losing people. And we just need that outside help. And it could just be a handful of things to make that presentation really shine, or it could be something deeper of maybe the way that we're communicating does not quite have the emotion or the empathy. So I can see how someone should go to peersandplayers.com right now to check out the website and look around and see if this is a problem that can be solved, even as long as we get over ourselves and get over the nervousness and the ego and all that mess that you and I both, Lisa, are spending a lifetime trying to overcome to be a better person in order to help others, because that is what it is all about. And as we're winding down our conversation here, do you have just a final parting lesson to share with us? Is there a favorite quote, moral, or lesson you have these days that you think would just really apply here?
I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. I can't think of an exact quote right now, but, you know, I think putting yourself in someone else's shoes wanting to understand where someone else is coming from, and perhaps external circumstances that, as well as internal, that might be affecting how they are behaving. Goes a long way if you can think about from someone else's perspective rather than just from your own.
And it's fun too, right? When you watch a movie or watch a TV show, you're in a way living through that person. When they feel pain or they're mad, you feel pain, and it's a little bit of an escape from yourself as well. And if we're in these stressful situations like presenting, it can take the anxiety and the pressure off of us because we're focused on the empathy and of the other people that we're speaking to. So I think that's a wonderful lesson, Lisa, is to have that empathy, think about what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And the very next step is to go to peersandplayers.com so that we can tap into some of these skills and fix up our presentations and just communicate better. So Lisa Peers from peersandplayers.com, it's been wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you so much, Robert. I've enjoyed it.